Formula Access. Today, we got a special guest. I hunted him down on LinkedIn. I caught a couple of his posts, and I was really excited that he had a story to tell. He's a former placement student in the aero department for RedBull Racing. And to follow up our previous message with a wind tunnel tech to kind of balance the conversation here, I thought this would be a really good time for you guys to hear that side of the puzzle. We vibed. We had a lot of fun. This is going to be a two-part episode. We're going to record again. We were really restricted on time. And so we had a lot to unpack in a short period of time. So this will be a quick one, guys. Hope you enjoy. You're really going to love it. This guy's awesome. Formula Access, welcome. Today, we got a really special guest, somebody that I met on LinkedIn, and I am really excited to have him. As soon as I saw a post from him, I said, I got to get him on here. I sent him a message and he responded in like 10 minutes. This whole thing came around like in no time. We today have an aerodynamicist from RedBull who has a massive passion for educating young people on transitioning a career in Formula One. We are so excited to have him. This is like one of the two value propositions that Formula Access provides is hope, education, and direction for young people. So Shub, man, so excited to have you. Welcome.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you for having me.
No problem. I gotta say, for a young person, when somebody gets as raw and authentic as you did in that like 5-post series of whatever, like people forget that we don't like static logoed or branded images anymore. Like we want to know people deeply. And I think that posts like that are really authentic. It's really hard to do the first couple of times that you do it because you're basically telling the entire world all these like personal things. And you assume that everybody's going to, make fun of you or, discount what you're trying to communicate. But I would bet the exact opposite has happened. And I applaud you for doing that.
Yeah. So the very story about why I wrote those LinkedIn posts is kind of crazy because if you've read the first post, it was like a challenge for me. It was like an icebreaker because I stopped being on LinkedIn 2 weeks actually into when I got the job at RedBull Racing. And I was like, so I was just thinking, looking at all these people, I was like, when I started my job, I was really enthusiastic and I was like, let's dive into it. I want to do this. And 2 weeks into it, and I was completely destroyed. I was like, man, this is so hard. Like, do I even deserve this? Like all the hard work that I put in over years and years. And I started dreaming about this when I was 13 years old. So it was literally 13 years of hard work. And I went there 2 weeks completely destroyed. I started questioning myself, to be honest. And that's when I said I need to kind of get everything out of the way and just focus on what I need to do. And that's where I uninstalled LinkedIn. I got rid of a lot of social media. I know it's a bit extreme step to take, but I felt like I really needed to single-handedly focus on what I was doing and get all the noise out, especially something related to professional life. And this was me after a year. I've had a lovely vacation after finishing my student placement at RedBull Racing. And I've had a lovely vacation in Italy, coming back to India right now. And I was just thinking, it would be lovely if I could just share my story with everybody out there, not just for aspiring kids, but also because I knew new student placement kids would come in. And I knew this time because of RedBull powertrains, there are like a lot of interns. Like at my time, there was like just a bunch of them. But right now there are a lot of interns, right? So I thought maybe sharing my story, and if they go through a similar struggle, it would kind of connect with them. So I just started writing it down, and I said, I need to break my silence on LinkedIn for myself. And that one post went absolutely viral. Like, I think I got like 65K impressions on it. And just all the people who've supported me through my journey for 13 years started commenting on it. And it was just so lovely to see all the warmth and support. And that kind of inspired me to write the other 5 posts, and I was like, people would love stories. Like people started getting to me and writing to me in private, like, how was meeting Adrian Newey? And, did you go to the trackside? And I just said, you know what, this deserves 5 stories. So that was my inspiration, to be honest. And I said, it was on because I started writing down on my whiteboard, what 5 stories would I put out? And so I'm like, one has to be with people, one has to be about the championship. And then I got lost. And literally the way I made it up was going through my photos. I'm just like, okay, so what did I actually do at Red Bull other than working on new ideas every single day? So I'm scrolling through photos. This happened. That happened. So I need to kind of write this stuff down. So yeah, thank you. I mean, it's been a pleasure, and it's been actually quite exciting and motivating for me to kind of go out there in the world and share my experience with everyone out there. And I have loved the response.
I gotta say, and I'm gonna pull it away from Formula One here real quick, but it's a personality trait with every single person that I've encountered inside of Formula One and even IndyCar and motorsport in general. Is I worked for a company, just kind of my first, call it real life career, business development. And, and I'd come from sales, and I was just like, I know what I'm doing. I'm amazing. I'm going to be your number one salesperson, and I'm going to crush it, and, just get out of my way. And I went to start at this company, and, the manager at the time was laughing. He's like, no, not going to happen. This is like learning Chinese, never going to happen. And I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. Starting the company, have no idea what I'm doing, totally lost. Everything that I thought I knew about sales was completely irrelevant. My work ethic was terrible relative to the rest of the team that had been there for a long time. And, very much like you, just kind of made the decision of like, I'm going to change behaviors to catch up and, and thrive in this environment. And, they do crazy stuff. Like I'd have to be making cold calls with the CEO of the company, and I'm sweating. I have no idea what I'm talking about in front of somebody that signs my paycheck. I was terrified. And, and 10 years later, I did become the number one salesperson in the company, and I did do things exactly like you described, which was, what does my day look like? Where am I wasting time? What are my distractions? What is stopping me from being the best and the, I don't know, the highest achiever in the business? And, I had to really, really evaluate and take a hard look at habits, TV, internet, social media, time management and whatnot. And I agree, like that we'd have people that would start and quit on their first day, and they'd walk out, they'd go to the bathroom and never come back. And I think that's like the difference maker, like that you describe, is I got there, I achieved the first part of my dream. And then I realized, I was basically jumping onto a treadmill running at full speed, and I needed to kind of take a deep look inside and reevaluate. And it ended up being good for you. I commend you for that, because it's a rare trait. I think in any young person in any generation is like, how can you put yourself aside and look at those things and say, I'm going to thrive in this environment, and get rid of the things that we're so used to.
Yeah. I really want to touch upon this, because a lot of people, after reading my post on, like the initial struggles, like did get in touch with me asking me about, so what did you do to kind of get out of that zone, get out of that mindset? And, other than doing the usual, people say meditate, workout and stuff like that. So I do a lot of meditation in the morning, and it was extremely necessary, in my opinion, to get in a workout in the afternoon. Because I sat back and I said, let's break my day down, right? I think something similar to what you were saying. Let's break my day down. And I said, I have a morning half, which goes quite well. And, I carry that, whatever missed opportunities or whatever concept that has not worked out, I take that stress into my evening, and that kind of affects my evening. So I need to kind of break the cycle. I need to break my day into 2 days. So I said, okay, let's hit the gym. And I got so used to hitting the gym, as that was like my midday break of 1 hour, just completely destroy yourself. Even though I should not completely destroy myself as you would in a gym, I would just, it would just be a mental exercise more than a physical exercise. Come back, destroy some lunch, and just get on with it again. And that took a huge leap in my productivity, and the way I came back struggling on the concept that I was struggling before, and just looking at it from a different perspective. But also something that really allowed me to separate myself from the process was coming at night. And almost like I remember for 4 to 6 months, and you have to remember that this 6 months were the 6 months in which we were building the 2022 car. So they were intense 6 months, because because of the previous year season, we had already started developing quite late. So everybody knows that, people never thought Red Bull will come with a competitive car this year because of the amount of effort that we were putting in last year. So what landed up happening was, we were working really hard at Red Bull, and it was constant brainstorming, and it would be late nights until 11, 12 were like common things. You'd come in at 8, leave at 11 or 12 at night. So what really helped me was, after I came down, I still remember, all lights out, just a small lamp on, silent music, right? And just telling myself, separating myself from the process, like telling myself that I am not the failure in concept that happened today. I am somebody who would come up with a new concept tomorrow, which I will try again tomorrow. Just separating yourself from the process. As my mentor, and I want to talk about him a little bit more on this podcast, probably slightly later, but my mentor always told me, Shub, you need to kind of not get emotional with this stuff. That was a big thing for me, because I always considered, like, I'm the kind of guy who would walk in playing the F1 music in the background, like for the first 1 month. I was super emotional with everything I was doing. And my mentor kind of realized that, and he told me, stop getting emotional, because A, it will cloud your judgment, and B, what it will do is, on most of the times in this job, you fail, then you succeed, as an engineer, because you're trying stuff out, you're pushing the boundaries. So you will end up feeling like a failure most of the times than the days where you will actually be super excited and super enthusiastic. And that kind of changed the way I was looking at things. I had to stop being a bit emotional about everything I did, and be more subjective and objective, to kind of really extract the best out of the concepts and even conversations that we were having. Because a lot of time what happens in F1 is, and this is just not my experience, but even like seniors who would come, they would always tell me that people, it's always like my concept, my baby, this is what I want on the car. And a lot of the senior management can quickly be like, this is the direction I want to follow. And some of the people that I would talk at Red Bull would always talk about at other teams, McLaren, Mercedes, this is the philosophy that this person or this chief designer wanted on the car, and that's the reason the car is built that way. So people get personal with their philosophies quite quickly. And at Red Bull, it was quite important for us to not get personal, but be objective with our goals, because all of us were trying to make the car faster. So yeah, good stuff.
My wife and I think today we have like 3 companies that we run. And we have this philosophy that we have built within our cultures, which is, you either win or you learn. We never fail. And it's always this mentality that, even if we mess something up or something doesn't work out the way that we anticipated, we learn from it, we adapt, and then we eventually win from that failure. And so it keeps the organization moving forward and not getting into that headspace like you described, emotional or not. I tend to agree sometimes, and I tend to disagree with that other times, just because it's like, man, when you get around somebody that's passionate, and maybe that's the better word, is passion versus emotion, but like it's something that I run into a lot in Formula One is 11 o'clock nights. Man, if you work in a bank at 11 o'clock at night, people are miserable. working at
industry.
11 o'clock in motorsports and something that you're truly passionate about and I'm a mission and a goal is normal, and it's
Yeah.
not that kind of, what do they call that, hustle culture where it's like really toxic work schedules and
Yeah, because
whatnot.
no
But
one forces you to do it,
no,
nobody forces you to do it. There are people who just leave at 5, but you're out there saying, I want this concept to work on this car so that I am able to contribute my tenth of a second.
yeah,
And yeah, basically that's it. And you're hustling. You're just like, you're trying to prove somebody wrong sometimes, because someone would just come up and say, you know what, I don't actually think this might work, but nobody will stop you. So give it a shot. And they're like, it's gonna work. You wait. And then you're like reading the regulations that you've read like 10 times and like, where can I find the loophole? Like literally you're waiting for everybody to go out of office and just be like, now there's silence, put on some headphones, because no one's going to come and disturb you. And you just start reading it on a big, just like start reading it all over again, like you never read it before.
well,
It's
whatever
fun.
you guys did for the 2022 car, it worked. So
Yeah.
you found whatever that hole was. And now I want to kind of backtrack slightly, and that is, you know, you worked for the aero department, kind of in the student placement program, but like really high level, like when you come into this role, like what is your job? Like what's your objective?
Well, when you come into this role, initially your objective is to honestly start with reading the regulations and try your ideas, because initially as an aerodynamicist you're excited and people just encourage you to try out whatever you've wanted. And then as the dust settles down, then your primary objective is to basically run your ideas and your seniors ideas, collaborate and brainstorm together, so that you can kind of prove those ideas and work with other engineers from other departments to improve the processes while implementing those ideas. And then added to that, you have to also run the wind tunnel. As a student, we didn't have to do much with the wind tunnel, but if you're an employee there, like an aerodynamics engineer there, then you're also involved in running the wind tunnel. So you do wind tunnel shifts, in which sometimes you do day shifts, night shifts. And that's probably all of, that's it pretty much, because you have to it's quite repetitive in nature, but it's innovative at the same time, because in a funny way I would just go in and I would just do the same job over and over again, but it would always be like, there's a new idea, let's do it the other way. And it's always about constantly improving the process. And I remember when I came in, the philosophy that I described it to my mom was, imagine that there was a meteorite going to hit the earth tomorrow and you had to find the solution today. That is the philosophy. Literally, that's the rate at which people work. Like we say, people are just hooked up, like in the PCs, just like imagining and drawing stuff together. So yeah, it's pretty much designing. So you are basically assigned into a group, like maybe a front car part or like a mid car, the floors, or even the rear car group. So you're assigned a group and you said, okay, this is your first project. Like my first project was that lovely little dive plane on the end plate. And you said, okay, just go crazy with it. These are the rules, come up with some ideas. Let's crack on with it. And yeah, you design over and over again, you fail over and over again. And someday you find performance and you say, hey, I found performance. And then you go into the wind tunnel and it says, no, boy, today's not a good day. Today's not a good day for performance.
Just to break this down too, because okay, so you have the front of the car, so obviously the wind hits your element first, but then your element moves air into a series of other elements down towards the back of the car. How collaborative is the front, mid, and rear groups with their work? Because I'm already like getting overwhelmed thinking like you're in charge of this little end plate, and somebody else is, in charge of like other components of the front wing, who are then, in charge of a series of components in front of the side pods, and then so forth. Like how do these iterations work? I mean, is it exhausting, or do you really and truly need, a year in advance of 12-hour days to achieve that kind of collaboration
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question because so the way it's structured at Red Bull, right, is you have basic aerodynamicists who are like graduate aerodynamicists or seniors, and then you have principals, and then you have at the very high level the chiefs. And there are people looking at a car philosophy. So there are people looking at, okay, what kind of aero philosophy should we adopt? You know, like you can say the Mercedes zero side pod philosophy versus Red Bull's philosophy of honestly being quite open about what we wanted to develop. We did not have a philosophy when we began. We wanted to explore opportunities and options. So there are principals and heads who look at at a philosophical level and saying, oh, can you put that vortex structure at that place? That has helped us in the previous, in the past and previous regulations. And then you kind of break it down to like heads, and then they kind of define objectives to the leads of each group and say, while somebody like Merck has invested a lot of money in making and bringing a lot of front wing upgrades. So it's all philosophical, and the students and the graduate aerodynamicists would be like, okay, how do I achieve that vortex structure in that place, like near the tire, away from the tire, clockwise, anti-clockwise. And there are like if you've learned aerodynamics and if you get into it, there are like fundamental things like tire squirt and all that gibberish that goes into the floor. So you know that your objective is to kind of reduce that tire squirt going into the floor as much as possible. And that's what you try to target, you know, with all this fancy tips that you see the Merc has. That's honestly what they're trying to do. So the tire squish that is present, that is basically the gibberish that's there between the inside face of the tire and basically the inside of the front wing. All that gibberish goes inside the floor, and what you're trying to do is protect all that dirty air going into the floor. And how do you do that is through vortex structures from the front wing end plate tips. And that's what Merck are trying to do. That's why you see all the sharp elements there, because basically the rules don't allow you to have sharp elements, but the rules can be bent, as we've seen. And if you have some sharp elements, if you have a defined trailing edge, then you can shed a vortex structure and kind of control all the gibberish that goes in. So you have a philosophy, and what we do is probably depending on what, you know, at what point you are in the development, if you find a big gain, everybody is like, okay, let's put the best of everything together and see if that gain survives. Or if that gain, if the floor has found some big performance, let's say, you know, and of course, you need to make sure that that gain goes ahead in your development, which basically what you do is you basically put the best of everything in together. And this is common in all F1 teams. It's not a big problem. It's not a secret or something, you know, where they put the best of all the development of all the teams and says, okay, how many points of downforce is that? And if you've suddenly lost after putting everything together, then what is it that's causing you to lose it? So it's a lot of like people think that it's very linear, like aerodynamics is very linear, but it's a highly non-linear subject. And sometimes when you put things together that have worked separately, it's a complete mess. So you have to be quite careful. And this problem does not just come in Formula One, but it's also in Formula Student. Like, you'll not believe, when I was in charge of when I was the aero lead at the MMR racing, which is the Modena racing team. There were a lot of times where I'm like, guys, we need to do a new model of the car where we've put everything together and all the benefits will just disappear. And then you kind of get into why it's happening.
So and I want to backtrack just for the non-technical listener. So you're describing, when you talk about the tire scoring and the dirty air coming from around the tires, you're talking
the lower
about
part of the tire.
You're talking about the front end vortexing clean air into that's fascinating to me. Okay. So like, to think of, I can drive this car and I can take air and get it clean air into where I need it to go, rather than all this road grime, tire grime, all the stuff, you know, getting chopped up in the marbles and the dirty side of the track and whatnot. It's fascinating stuff that you guys think about it. I love
a lot of effort kind of goes into tire shapes, tire models. Oh man, that is, because if you can get that right, that's your golden coin. There's so much effort that goes into all of the like predicting the right tire shape in your modeling tools. And everybody just tries to do that. You must have heard Mercedes, they used to always tell themselves that we have the best tire model prediction, especially like in the years that they dominated. And you can see last race that their tire models ain't that great, but it is a lot of effort, and it is very, very fundamental to understand the shape of the tire in your simulation tool. And if you get that wrong, everything else is kind of secondary, because people say that tires are really important for performance on track and the right temperature window and all of that. True, but you'll be surprised to know how much of the aerodynamics, like the front wings, the shape of the side pods and all of that, is just designed keeping the aerodynamics of the tire in mind. And that is the thing that unlocks all the secrets, basically.
What I thought was fascinating, and this is my race environment. So like when I watch a race, I have like pit lane data here, and I've always wrestled with going to the track and like, sitting in like the corner here, trying to get my finger there, and not seeing anything else in the track, and so I went and I was like, I got to do it. It's going to happen. I got to tell you, one of the most fascinating things about sitting, next to the track on a straightaway is the wind. Like, you think that these cars slice through the air, but they're really like drag machines. Like, you can hear the displacement of air when these things come by, and that's probably cool that the engines are much quieter than they used to be in the early 2000s. But like, I just like blew my wife's like, oh yeah, crazy exciting, and I was like, do you realize what, like, to make these things go fast? I mean, that's like putting your hand out of the car window like this and trying to hold it upright, and
Yeah.
it just, it's wild.
It's just funny because you mentioned that. Like, people ask me, like, can you explain me what you do? Like, a lot of people back home, like, they don't know what aerodynamics is. And when I say aerodynamicist, they're like, what the hell, bro? Like, what are you talking about? Right. So I basically give them that example. Like, imagine putting out your hand out of the window like this way, and then slowly turning it this way, and you'll just slowly turn it up, and you'll suddenly see that it just lifts up.
Yeah,
that's aerodynamics for you. If you put it like that, it's going to move behind. That's drag. And if you keep it like this and then slowly angle it up, that's your lift. And if you put it down, that's your downforce. So this, you putting your hand up like that kind of reminded me of that funny example. But remind me, what were we talking about? Because I kind of went off topic a bit, because I really had something interesting to tell you.
There is no off topic. I think it's really, we were talking about just how important the tires are with aerodynamics. And
yes. So what I was about to say is, people think that air just flows over an F1 car, but if you see the motion of air, like if there's some cool CFD stuff online too, which is not super accurate but gives you the feel of what I'm about to say. Turning the air using an F1 car elements like the front wing and all the crazy stuff that you see on the side pods and the floor and the rear wing, the amount of turning is insane. Like, you think that the air would go straight into the floor and just over the front wing, but it's literally like you're an airbender. Like, that's the feeling you get, like that Avatar airbender where you're just like moving stuff, creating like pressure difference. And you will not believe the amount of outwashing air that people tend to create. People say outwashing concept, inwashing concept. What are they really trying to do here? You're basically trying to take the air that you would otherwise expect to go straight and just push it out. And then how the hell do you do that? And that's where you're playing with like pressure differences. And it's like really fundamental being applied over and over and over again, and try and understand what kind of pressure difference can you create to kind of get the change in momentum of air that you want, which you think will give you the kind of performance that you need. And then repeat.
You guys are seriously rock stars. I like it's how okay, so let's go back. Like how did you get into this? Like where 13 years ago, how did this dream start? Like
It's strange because I used to watch sports, and I've described this a lot of times. I was just flipping over sports channels and I came across F1. It was 2007. And people don't remember this move where basically Lewis Hamilton goes around the outside on Eau Rouge, because people normally remember the Mark Webber Alonso move. But in 2007 also it happened, just not as crazy and frantic as the Mark Webber and Alonso move. But I saw that and I'm like, and they had this cute little speedometers back in 2007 and all of that. And I'm like, that's 200 kilometers an hour. Or like, no, but it was miles an hour back then. So it's 200 miles an hour. I didn't even know what was miles an hour back then, to be honest.
yeah.
And I was like, how is that happening? How is that possible? And again, like back in the day, I had internet that was like 128 kbps per second, like literally. So I start Googling like Formula One. And I still remember, I don't know if you've seen on YouTube that lovely Martel Brundle video with a Red Bull car and trying to show air that's going over the car. If you haven't seen it, man, it'll blow your mind. Trust me.
Okay.
So that video popped up, and I started watching that video, and I'm like, gosh, this is quite cool. Like, how is this happening? This is kind of really doing some, like inspiring me to the next level. And then I started like going into blogs of Formula One and trying to read about aerodynamics. And the more I read, the more I realized that nobody actually knew what the hell was going on. And I was like, what is this subject about? Because there's nobody who actually seems to be an expert on this subject, right? And that's where I came across the word aerodynamics. And ever since then, I've just chased that word. I've just tried around, asking around, how do I learn aerodynamics? Aerospace engineering came up, and I'm like, let's do that. That's a good. People ask me like, why did you do aerospace engineering? They thought I was into planes and space stuff, and I was like, no, Formula One. Yeah, that's the thing. And people are like, what is that? Back home in India back then. And yeah, that's what got me in. But as I grew up, I realized what was really exciting about the entire challenge was, unlike any other job, Formula One jobs, at least before the cost cap. Now it's kind of reduced because the excitement is reduced because of the cost cap as an engineer. But before the cost cap, your creativity was your limit. The cost was not your limit, right?
Yeah.
Because they had unlimited budget, right? People would just like throw money, like stupid amount of money at it. And the thing is, even if you have a good car, that might not be it might not win at every single track. Your problem statement is changing track by track, and every track poses a different problem statement, which you are involved in kind of solving. So if you think about a job, if you work on a project, like I've worked at Bell, you work 1 year at trying to improve and optimize this product, and it will fly some god day, who knows, and but here, in 1 week, 1 month, your development is on the car, and then that development might not be the best because you go onto a new track and that might fail like completely. So I remember I told my manager that it's such an evolving problem statement that I love it. I think that's something to strive towards, and that's what kept me going.
It's this constant, I'm like Mr. Anti-routine. And it's like, I think that's one of the reasons why I do what I do as my day job, is because every day is different, and every challenge is different. And I never walk in to work and it's the same thing every day. Like there's always a new challenge. There's always a new element. There's always something. And maybe the ADD in me is just like my wheels get to spin and problem solve. And it's
crazy because, as you said, a wheel needs to spin. There's a flying wheel in the background.
Yeah.
Literally.
What? So do you come from a family of Formula One fans?
No, nobody around me even knows what Formula One is. Even today, like my mom would be like, I don't know what it is, just fast cars going around, but they don't look like cars for some reason. And that's how she knows Formula One, by the way. There are cars that race around that don't look like cars.
Yeah.
But I come from a place where nobody even knows about Formula One initially. Now, yes, of course, because of Drive to Survive, But yeah, back in 2007, there was not a single person that I knew who I could speak Formula One about, except for one cousin of mine who's a really cool cousin, and I could always speak to him about Formula One. And he kind of takes the piss with me now, like in the sense that he says, "Oh, you actually made it, didn't you? You were a kid who was just annoying me with Formula One stuff, putting your opinions about Fernando Alonso being better than Lewis Hamilton, because he was a Lewis Hamilton fan back then."
Yeah.
And now you see you've made it. So who's better now? No, I don't come from a family anywhere close to Formula One.
How did you get that? People and I talk about this too much in the show, but like people see Formula One as this big intimidating machine. And it's like, I want to be an engineer, I want to be an aerodynamicist, I want to be a driver. How do I get from this thing that I am to this thing that is like overwhelming and scary? How did you go from I'm going to be an aerodynamicist in Formula One to actually, getting into Formula SAE, getting into the student placement program? Like, how did you figure that out?
Well, I would say the first step was Google telling me that if you want to learn aerodynamics, the course that you need to do is aerospace engineering, right? And back then in India, doing aerospace engineering, you only had like top 4 IITs, which are like the most elite colleges of India. And I tried for it. I didn't get into it, but then I had like a backup option, which was a new college, which was a new branch of a existing college, which was in Bangalore. And Bangalore is the aerospace hub of India because a lot of space companies are present. And this university kind of brought in all retired people, like retired professors, people who had a lot of industry knowledge. And I said, this is quite a good college to go into. I'll be meeting a lot of like-minded people. And I remember giving up actually a lot of good opportunities in good colleges just because they did not have aerospace engineering. And a lot of our lives back in India are kind of driven by our family, by our parents. And I'm always grateful for my mom because she always said, go for it. I have no clue what you're doing. I don't understand it, but go for it. Let's see what can be done. She knew I was a smart kid, and if I had something on my mind, I would do it. That's all she had faith in. So I started doing aerospace engineering just out of my love for the subject aerodynamics. So I didn't pay attention too much to any other subject, and I knew that as I finished my bachelor's in aerospace engineering, I knew I had a choice where if I could go to the US for like my master's and stuff like that. But then I saw that not many people actually made it from US to Formula One. So I said, okay, I have to do something about it in Europe, right? So obviously UK comes up and all these universities in the UK, like Southampton, Racing Car Aerodynamics course, one of the best out there to kind of get into the industry. So I got this lovely job opportunity with Bell Helicopters. And that opportunity was basically the exact similar role if you would actually work in Formula One. Which was basically like doing aerodynamic development on helicopters and doing performance analysis and handling quality analysis of experimental helicopters for Bell. And I said, this is a great training platform. Like I can really hone my skills, become better. And to my luck, I found amazing mentors at Bell, and an amazing mentor and an amazing manager who just allowed me to do whatever I wanted. That became the playground. And after 2 years, I remember just saying that, I've reached an age where if I don't get out now, I'll be in this for the long term. And I said, I got into the racing car aerodynamics course at Southampton University, for which only 10 people from the entire world get selected for that course. And guess what? I did not have the money to pay for it. I couldn't afford it. And I remember, people say drunk decisions are bad, but I was kind of drunk one day. Sorry, mom. And I kind of stepped back and I said, okay, Formula One, 7 teams, 6 teams from UK, 1 from Switzerland and 3 from Italy. I said, what can you do? I said, I haven't looked at Italy. And that's where Munnar came. Like this course, nobody had heard about because it had just started like 2 or 3 years ago. And it's funny because that course was started because they started losing a lot of Italian talent to other European countries. So they started this course in collaboration with Ferrari, Alfa Tauri, Dallara, with Haas Formula One team and Lamborghini, basically, and with 4 or 5 universities. And they said, we are going to train this elite bunch of students whom we are going to hire immediately, basically, because we're going to train them the way we want our employees to be. And there were no reviews about this university, but when I read about it, like in terms of what it promises, I'm like, this is what I want, this is what I need. And everybody were against, like, why are you going to Italy, dude? It's a place for tourists, not for academia. And I said, first of all, it's a ticket to Europe, I can afford it. They're actually respecting all the amount of effort that I've put in by giving me a good scholarship. And I said, Italy, let's find out, new experiences, we'll see what happens. You can't hold yourself back because you don't know what life is going to, what opportunity life is going to present you. So I dived in. The moment I came in, I said, I saw that they had a great Formula student team. And I said, let's get on with it. Let's participate in Formula student. And life at Munnar was really hard because it's really difficult course to kind of go through. And my training at Dallara was absolutely fundamental in how I landed up grabbing the opportunity with RedBull Racing during my student placement interviews. And Formula student obviously is a key part of actually doing hands-on stuff when it comes to applying your knowledge onto an existing part before going into Formula One. But what was really key was I remember answering my RedBull student placement interview. And I remember just sitting back because it was like 6 interviews of 20 minutes each. And in which basically the HR managers, fundamentalists who basically ask you why. Every answer you give, you just ask you why, until you say, okay, dude, like, I don't know why. So fundamentalists, and even like somebody I remember asked me a question like, so how did you prepare for this interview? And I'm like, that's a cool question to ask. Yeah. But I remember walking away from that interview and thinking, if I don't probably get this now, somebody else deserved it. Because all my preparation had led me to that one moment, to those set of interviews. And I was just like, if I don't get this now, I would never be, in a better position to answer an interview of this caliber and this quality again. And I made it, and I couldn't believe it. I remember crying when I actually got the offer letter. And my mom was like, what's up with you? I said, I made it. She's like, made it into what? I said, I'll be on TV now. You'll see me on TV.
What? Okay, on that preface, what's been your pinch me moments? You had a year in Formula One. What?
Yes.
Like, what was the moment where you're like, I can't believe that I'm here?
Pinch me moment was actually very recently when I got a chance to go to Monza and I was in the garage. And that was like, shit, this is happening. That was the pinch me moment, which was quite latest. But early on in the career, when I just started just walking into RedBull Racing, you've seen it in so many videos, you've seen it, and you just go like, oh my God, like this is happening. And the third pinch me moment, there were 2 more actually. There's one when Max Verstappen became the world champion, and the next day he came to factory, and there was this Orange Army celebration basically at the factory. And I remember he gave his speech and his greetings to everybody, and then he was kind of leaving so that people don't irritate him too much. And I kind of slowly went from behind. I knew this was going to happen. And I'm like, mate, you need to have a photo with me, right? And that was a pinch me moment, like the world champion, like the Formula One world champion. Next day, I'm having a photo with him. That's just incredible. And the last moment was with Adrian. And this was, I have not been able to share this, but this is a very new story. It's not there out on LinkedIn. So what happened was, it was my last day. I was nearing the end of my student placement, and I had very few interactions with Adrian, which you already know. So I went into his cabin with the book that is up there, right? How to design a car. And I walked into his room thinking how I'm going to introduce myself and what I'm going to say to him. I walked into his room and he says, "Hi Shub, how can I help? I heard you're leaving us soon." I'm like, shit, this guy knows my name. Oh my God. And that was a pinch me moment because I froze at that point. And it was so lovely of him, not just to, he could have just simply signed off the book and given it to me, but he actually sat down, wrote a lovely like paragraph on the first couple of pages of the book and said, "Thank you for all your work. And hopefully I see you again around here." And I was like, that was it. I was like, this is it. It comes from the guy at the top.
I mean, he's like the tip of the spear when it comes to aerodynamicists. I mean, that guy's built more championship winning
Graceful.
cars for more teams than anyone on earth.
Exactly.
It's wild. Plus he's a really interesting guy. And it sounds to me like he's a very personal person. And I've heard that from a lot of Red Bull people. It's just the culture of, acknowledgement and, and really kind of, again, he knew your name, and 1,000 employees, he knew your name. And, I think that's important to remember in the grand scheme of things. So your placement's done. Like what next?
So I've come back to university and I've been, because I cannot use any of the information that I did in Formula One and publish a thesis on it. So I'm quietly working on a thesis with my professor at university. And 3 months into it, I told him, "Can I go to India, skip the winter in Europe and enjoy the winter, which is your summer in India?" And spend some time with family, because once I finish my thesis, what's going to happen is, you get into the grind again. Maybe I go back to Red Bull, or maybe I try other opportunities based on what's coming, what's out there in the market at that point. So I said, okay, I have this time when I do my thesis. I'm going to kind of give back, like help people who want to get in. And so right now, my two things that are basically occupying my time are my thesis and this YouTube channel, which I've started, in which I am going to tell people how can you get into Formula One, basically help them build their resume, their cover letter, and kind of say, okay, what kind of philosophy you need to have going into the interview, what kind of questions can you expect going into it, and then kind of give my opinions on aerodynamic and aerodynamic upgrades. I haven't got into that yet. And then basically discussing race weekends. I really love, one of the key things that I learned after working in Formula One once is that after you get into it, you're so detail oriented that you forget the bigger picture completely. You forget why you love the sport in the first place because you're so much into, okay, I want to make this part, I want to make this part. And I tell you, like after 4 or 6 months into the entire placement, for the first time, I actually sat back and I watched a race without being in the company, somewhere outside. And I was like, man, this feels good. Just to be a spectator feels good right now. So I actually realized that I loved the sport for what it is, from outside also. So I want to talk about it to other people, and that's what I'm trying to do now, and see how it feels like, because sometimes you have an expectation of something that you'll do and how it will feel, and they don't really match up. So I'm kind of trying now if me kind of talking about Formula One is something that I really enjoy at a public scale. And it's been fun until now.
It's great that you do that, and I try to do little segments of how you got started in all of my interviews. And it's fascinating because like if you listen to them, none of them go to a website and fill out an application and wait for a response. And I think that having somebody such as yourself that has like been through that, getting more in the details of like, once I get a degree in engineering and aerodynamics or mechanical engineering or whatever it is, and then I apply, I think that's important. But you're also educating on how do you take a dream and a passion and like, what school do I go to? What programs do I get into? If I can't afford these schools, what are my other options? Like you're very entrepreneurial in the way that you decipher data and circumstances. And I think that, you know, I immediately think, well, he can't afford that school. He's going to just take out a huge loan and bury himself in debt and not like, and you didn't do that. You found an alternative and a backdoor into the situation. And I think that that's really valuable to young people getting into the sport and really like understanding how do I get these gifts and these traits to make me successful in Formula One. And then, you know, listening to stories about, you know, the head of Williams Esports responded to a social media post, you know, it's like, what do you want to see on our social media? And the guy's like, career stuff, you know, and he sent a private message and was like, what do you mean? And then they had a back and forth conversation and he's like, I like esports racing. And then he's like, why don't you come in and take a look at what we got? And then, you know, fast forward a year or two later and he's the head of esports, you know, and that was he was unemployed. That's a leap of faith. You know, the head of wind tunnel at Mercedes, I had her on my show, you know, and I want to put these two episodes together because they're so complementary. But, you know, she was part of Benetton. She sent, you know, she wanted to be an aerodynamicist as well. And she sent letters, you know, that's how far back that was to, you know, the people at Benetton, you know, and ended up with BR Honda, Braun, and now Mercedes. And like, it's such a cool, because she kept not answering my questions because she's not in the aerodynamic group. So I really like, the more that you're talking, I'm like, oh my, I gotta butt these two episodes up to each other. Like this is awesome. So honestly, Shub, I know we got to stop here, but like we got to have a part 2 because I was reading your 5 posts yesterday and I was like, man, there's so much stuff to unpack here. And, you know, and I know we only had an hour to get to this today, but I think, you know, in a couple months we should really do this. I think, you know, it can help extend our reach and our channels as well. But I really think there's some stuff to unpack, and I really think it'd be cool to kind of follow you and to, you know, tell the story of, you know, where are you going to end up, and however we can help in that process as well. You know, always just shoot me a message. I'm here to make friends. We're friends now. So you're stuck with Ryan.
Well, lovely to meet you for the first to begin with, but you know, I enjoyed this conversation. And I think we kind of vibe at a lot of levels. It's not like a podcast or an interview, but I think just as people, we vibe quite a lot. So I'd be happy to come back and, you know, maybe, you know, after doing the entire series of how to get into F1, which is like 5-6 episodes that I'm planning to do at YouTube, and a couple of other videos, maybe before the start of the season, maybe we could like sit down together and kind of do a session where we you know, brainstorm, you know, or kind of speculate what's next and stuff like that. It'd be cool.
So let me add this. So I have this Liam Neeson like skill set of like hunting people down, you know, that don't want to be found. And it served me really, really well in sales and in business. And I think I actually, as you're saying this, I'm like, okay, you know, my wheels are spinning already. So like, doing this and understanding like how you get into Formula One, I would love to do like a joint episode of like, you know, now I've acquired these skill sets. I have a CV. I have targets that I want to shoot at. I'd love to also discuss like, how do I hunt these people down? You know, if I want to be you know, an aerodynamicist, how do I find the head of aerodynamics? How do I find the head of HR, you know, and then how do I shine in the light? Like that's shining in the sun of 1,000 people trying to get that job is really hard. And I have some input that I can help with. So you call me and I'll be on your show and we can.
We can do that actually. That'd be fun. But just to sign off on what you said, one of the big things is you have to create a name for yourself on platforms like LinkedIn. That's fundamental and that's really important, because I remember when I was about to apply for RedBull, because of you will not respond to an unknown person. But if you've seen somebody's CFD post, aerodynamic posts, and all of that stuff, then you're more likely to respond to a query that he's asked. And that was such a fundamental key, because I actually knew people at Red Bull even before I went there. In the sense, I mean, not physically, but through LinkedIn, because they had responded to some of my queries, and they responded because I was putting stuff out there that was relevant for them. So yeah, all these kind of strategies, we can kind of make an episode together where we kind of help people in which, they get these ideas, and maybe it might also help them out.
So listeners, you're going to hear a lot more from the two of us. I like you said, I'm vibing here too. I like the technical world, and I love your approach to your unconventional approach to getting into the sport. So Shub, man, thank you for being on. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to this. To be continued.
Yeah, my pleasure. Let's get on to it again after some time. See ya.
Let's do it.
Have a good one.